Alright guys, today we're going to be looking at this job we did. It was a window well cover. Pretty bread and butter work for a CNC plasma business, but nothing that we've really pushed or advertised. It's just we landed this job from a farmer's market, and actually since completing this we've landed another one very similar, so people seem to like this product, and nice little service you can add to your repertoire if you're going to be cutting. So basically, you saw the first little clip on site. There was a window well. I took some measurements and then drew it up. The client didn't want anything fancy, just a typical grate looking thing. The most design feature they wanted, they said, make it diagonal lines so it's a bit more attractive and intentional, I guess. So we're just cutting on the table. This is 1/4 inch thick steel, and no problem for our setup, and just running the cut, nothing really to it. I've been running the cut a little bit slower lately because just having a few problems with our table, so it definitely helps the quality. But another problem that happened, because we're in the summer, it gets quite hot, and I'm running the cut slower. You'll see what's about to happen is the table's been tripping my breaker, so that's another concern that happens. Like, doesn't normally happen, but sometimes if I'm running really long cuts, or the actual like plasma arc is staying lit for like long periods of times, like 2 or 3 minutes on a longer perimeter of a cut, sometimes it'll trip the breaker. It's not too much. I definitely recommend when you're cutting to just stay nearby and keep an eye on your cuts. I used to be more nonchalant about it, but it definitely sucks to come back to a cut that's not fully finished and you have to trace back what went wrong. But you'll see here, the perimeter is cutting on this plate, looked like it went well, and then it stops here. So I quickly click pause, and then what I do is I track back the machine to an earlier corner, and I run the program on what's called a dry run. So right now it's still following the same cut path, just with no plasma arc going through. And then I'll click pause just as I get close to where the point it died. Obviously I reset my breaker and everything, and then I turn it on to a proper cut with the plasma cut enabled, with the plasma arc enabled, and then we finish this cut. So nothing real to it. You always run into some little gremlins sometimes when you're cutting, at least every now and again. Every once in a while you get a handful of jobs cutting with no breaks, and that's always enjoyable. Alright, so now that the piece is cut, I'm just going to unload it. It's always nice to have some kind of a tool nearby to dig into the holes of offcuts, to be able to lift these plates and stuff up. Sometimes they get quite heavy, especially if you're cutting in 1/4 inch and above. So we'll get that to the table. If you caught that, that was almost a pretty bad fall while carrying a pretty heavy plate. So definitely, word to the wise, try and keep your shop organized, especially around things on the ground. Not a good idea. Almost ended up like the Three Stooges, or some kind of Looney Tune rolling down carrying something heavy. Anyway, so after it's cut, the first step is to wire wheel. So I'll show you some of this stuff, but you basically just go over the entire plate and every border with the wire wheel, try and knock off all the slag. And then after the wire wheel, I'll come back with a flap disc and really focus on the edges to make sure everything's softened and or rounded. This is like a dual purpose, like it's for quality of product. You don't want things going to customers all sharp, and it's, nice to handle. Like if you have a lot of work to do on specific pieces and you're going to be handling a lot, it's always good if deburring And cleaning up the edges is one of the first parts of the process. That way you're not cutting up your hands. That way there's no concerns on that front. So you see I'm just going over the border. I don't know if this makes sense to most people, but if you see how I run the grinder, it's the spinning motion always goes into the edge. It's just something, when you deburr something, sometimes you're flicking up a burr. So if you're running the spinning motion away from the plate, you're just going to leave a sharp edge going away from it. I mean, there's other ways to avoid it. It really depends on the angle of your flap disc, but in general, when you see me cleaning, you'll most of the time see the spinning motion going into the edge of the plate, if that makes any sense. I mean, if you know, you know, maybe. I'm not sure. Alright, so the second part to this plate is I was just going to weld some stiffeners. And this is because if you saw in the first clip, the backyard, this is kind of a high traffic area. The client's window well goes right into his patio hangout area. So he wanted something that was safe for his kids and anybody to step on in case they're not paying attention, or so they really just don't have to worry about it. So I'm adding a few stiffeners and then a little lip at the front. That's simply so that the plate isn't going to shift. So the stiffeners kind of do two things. It's going to keep it in place so it doesn't get knocked out of place, and then also stiffen up that plate so there's no concern when standing on it. So pretty beefy, but I think it's worth the extra little bit of welding to make sure that there's going to be no concerns on this build. Wouldn't want the 1/4 inch is probably strong enough, but you know, like 200-pound person in the middle of that, it's going to start to sag or bounce a little bit, so this will definitely help that. It's one of those things, like the client didn't specifically ask for, they just asked for a window well cover, and they wanted it safe to stand on, so that's why I'm doing this. You know, not every client's going to understand. They think you might just be cutting a grate. I mean, I can always cut this out of 1/2 inch steel, charge way more, and not be able to lift the thing. So this is a happy medium, just a little bit of welding, really nothing fancy, and all these stiffeners are going to be hidden. Like, I'm following the pattern of the grill, so you're not going to see them when it's set in place, and I think it's just the best way to do it. So it's just a piece of tubing in the middle and some angle iron on the back and front. Alright, and then once I get these 3 pieces fully welded in, I'm just going to hit everything with a flap disc one last time, get rid of all the weld BBs, and grind down anything that's unsightly. Once again, this is kind of going to be hidden, all this underside, but you want to make sure there's no BBs, or sometimes when you're welding with the BBs or the edge of a weld, like, things can get sharp, so you just go over everything quickly with a flap disc so there's no unwieldy parts to this final product. And once that's all done, I'll bring it outside and hit this with some paint. You guys have seen me paint before, nothing fancy to it. Just set it out in the sun and get a nice thick coat of a rattle can spray paint. I mean, if you're running this business at a small scale, it's something that comes with the territory. Like, it's definitely good to offer paint to some capacity. Like, even if you really don't like doing it, like, there's clients that just want a final product, and they are definitely not interested in a steel piece that they have to take to another paint shop or something. So just offer it, and if you have to coordinate with other paint shops, then coordinate and mark up the price. So now we're on site with the finished piece. The first step was that I needed to do, which I talked with the client, is to trim the window well. It was sticking up anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch at different parts of this. I think it's like a stamped concrete. Not entirely sure, but anyway, so I just set up with an angle grinder and went around the perimeter of this window well and cut it all flush to the interlock, or what did I call it? Stamped concrete. So maybe that process might have taken 5-10 minutes. It really wasn't that long. And then I was going to drop the plate in, and like as you see, the stiffeners and stuff, they're fully invisible. You don't see them in there, so that's good. Now I do have an issue. The grate is actually bigger than I thought, and I see the concrete from the grill, so I definitely made the border. I mismeasured the border or something. A little bit disappointed here, and just kind of thinking what I can do. The client never actually saw this. It's just a little gap showing the concrete, and the client was out of town, I think. All right, so obviously I made a big mistake in the templating. So this scratch here in the paint is the actual window well. So I'm gonna have to get creative here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this section all the way to about here, and then and I'm gonna cut it right along where all the grill starts. Then I'm gonna shift it to the meets over there, and I'll scribe where it marks, cut the grill again, and re-weld it. See if I can make this seamless. If it looks good enough, then we'll be back on track. If it's too shoddy, then we'll have to recut this plate. So as you were seeing from that little scribe line that I made on the paint, we're about an inch off at the very most, and it showed the concrete underneath. You know, some clients might have been okay with how it looked, and you know, you can always ask and see, are you guys okay with this? But I knew that I made a mistake, and like I said, the client was out of town. I didn't want to bother like seeing if it was acceptable for something I know to be kind of my fault. So that's why I'm back in the shop trying this fix. I really didn't want to have to recut this plate. Obviously, material costs money, and you know, it's time as well to recut something. Not that this was any less time to do this adjustment where I'm cutting it by hand and then I'm going to try and re-weld it. But okay, so here's what we got going on. This is where it was, and then I cut it in a way so that I can kind of just shift it up to where we need it and lose the least amount from this bottom corner, and cover the portion that was too big on the grill portion. So I'm going to do all the cuts now and see if we can hide it in the welding process. So yeah, just wanted to deliver a final product that I was happy with. So here I'm just tacking everything in place. I'm gonna take my time and make sure everything's as flush as possible. That'll give me the best opportunity to hide. It'll give me the best opportunity to hide the seams, where if I can get a nice clean weld and grind them flush, it's gonna be hard to notice that this process that I'm doing right now was ever even done. So in a perfect world, the client's gonna see the plate and it's gonna look like it was literally just cut off the plasma table and delivered. Obviously you're seeing this video now and you see that there's quite a bit of work. There's like 9 or 10 different little welding seams that have to be as clean as possible. Obviously the underside's not as important where we're welding on right now, but I'm really trying to make sure that the bars are flush, that those seams aren't overlapping in any way, which will definitely make it harder to hide when I'm grinding and stuff. So not much to it, just like I said, taking my time. I don't think I'm going to show too much of the welding process, but I had it set up as nicely as I could. Took my time on the welding, and then, a tedious amount of work with a flap disc, but enough to get it where I was pretty happy with it. I stripped the whole thing down with a wire wheel, got rid of all the paint, and repainted the entire piece. Sometimes if you just try and strip where you did some additional work and repaint, that's another mismatch that you're going to see. Like in the paint job, you'll see what the old paint and the new paint was, and it'll just highlight the extra work you did. So in this case, once I was done all the work on the actual piece, stripped it all down, fresh coat of paint, and then we went back on site. So like I was saying, apart from this mistake, this type of work is actually quite a good style job for a CNC plasma business. Obviously, without this fix, there's really not that much welding. You could get away with builds like this without any welding. It depends on the application. If it was just a cover, you know, just for visual applications, you can definitely cut these without worrying about the actual weight bearing capacity. Like this could be done out of 11 gauge or something a bit thinner if they just wanted some nice pattern covering their window wells. Some window wells are just tucked into garden beds and stuff, so it's a solution you can offer to embellish people's yards and stuff. So subsequently, after this job, I posted some of the work and did a little promo with it, and you'll see some of that video if you check the shorts on this channel, like where I show you how to post before and after videos. And we've gotten requests. We've quoted a couple jobs to replicate this specific solution where people might be walking on it, and we actually landed a job of the other version I'm describing. So we're going to be in a garden bed next week, just doing something a bit more, just more to make the garden bed more sightly rather than a grate that needs to be stood on. You know, as always, guys, have some class, I like to say. So just comment down below if you enjoyed this video. Make sure you leave a like. Ask me some questions if you have any questions about the gear, the job, any kind of questions about this whole project. Or make sure you subscribe for more. We're always going to be posting our jobs and works. And if you want to make some suggestions on what you want to see next in videos, hit me up in the comments and we'll get that rolling.
There you have it.
Thanks for watching.